Good morning, boys and girls. So yesterday we talked about the French and Indian War and how France lost, Britain got their land, but now Britain is in debt. And so they passed those new taxes on the colonists. As we discussed yesterday, we're going to finish those notes today. So if you didn't get those notes written in your notebook yesterday, make sure you do. You're going to need them for your test next week, okay? But we're going to start today talking about what it was called when Britain put those taxes on the colonists. That was known as the Stamp Act of 1765. So remember yesterday we talked about the French and Indian War ending in 1763. So this was a few years later after Britain realized how much debt they were in. They needed that extra support, that extra income. And again, this act required colonists to pay taxes on printed documents. Okay, so anything that was printed, the colonists had to pay additional money, those additional taxes on that good. The colonists, as we can imagine, were not entirely thrilled about that. They were not happy about that. So they did protest. And the way that they did that this first time, they boycotted. We can say by boycotting. And that just means refusing to buy taxed goods. So anything that was printed, the colonists said, okay, well, we can do without that for a little bit. That's fine. They decided to boycott those in order to stand up to King George. Okay. Now, just a year later, in 1776, we're going to focus a lot on dates today. In 1776, the British government listened to them and did take away a few of those taxes. Not all of them, but they took back a few. So took back some taxes. However, when they took back some taxes, they passed new ones. They passed new laws that now taxed other goods such as glass, paint, and tea. Now, one thing that we know about Britain and the British culture is that they do enjoy their tea. And some of us may have heard about the event that we're getting ready to talk about with the tea and what the colonists did to then protest again. Now, instead of before, when they just boycotted, they refused to buy everything. When Britain taxed them again, now on more goods than just the printed documents, they said, okay, we have had enough. This is not fair to us. So we're going to show you how serious we are. So the next event is going to take place, the next protest is going to take place in 1773. So about 7 years after those new taxes were put in place. Okay. This next event is going to be the Boston Tea Party. Now, there were some other things that happened in between these times. They let their feelings be known. They let their emotions be known and how they thought that it was unfair. Okay, but this is the big event that happens where they say, King George, we do not agree. We're going to show you this time. The Boston Tea Party took place in Boston, Massachusetts. If you ever happen to make it up to Massachusetts and you make it to Boston, they do have reenactments of the Boston Tea Party. You can actually go onto a ship and toss over a barrel of tea. Now, the barrels of tea that they have now are attached to strings, so it's not going to go actually into the harbor like it did back then. But you can go and you can reenact what the colonists did. So the colonists went onto a ship and they tossed over the chest of tea into the harbor. Now, one thing to know about these colonists, some of them came dressed as Indians. Dressed as Indians. And the reason that they did that is because they were paying for the French and Indian War. So they were still just trying to make that point to King George, like, this is not fair. So they boarded ships that had the goods on them, had those items on them. And dumped the tea, the chest of tea, into the harbor. Into the harbor. So there was a lot of tea in that harbor because they were shipping over a lot of tea from Britain to the colonists. But when they arrived, they said, nope, we don't want it. And it went into the water. Now, another event that took place, another kind of tea party, as they call it, that took place, happened in North Carolina. So this Boston tea, but the big one, happened in Massachusetts, much more north of us. But there was a tea party that happened in North Carolina. This was not as eventful as the Boston Tea Party, but it definitely made the colonists' point very clear. This tea party happened specifically on October 25th of 1774, and this is known as the Edenton Tea Party. And again, this tea party did take place in North Carolina, happened in Edenton, North Carolina. So again, just like with Boston, with the Boston Tea Party, with the Edenton Tea Party, you can go visit Edenton, and they have reenactments and stuff as well. They have museums set up to remember this. With the Edenton Tea Party, this one focused much more on the women of the time. So Boston Tea Party with these colonists, when they dumped the tea over, that was more men that did that. The Edenton Tea Party was women, and they were led by Penelope Barker. Now, what Miss Barker chose to do instead of an event like the Boston Tea Party, her and about 50 other women signed a pledge to not drink tea or wear the clothes shipped over from Britain. Now, this event is also significant for another reason. So yes, they were standing up to King George saying, this is not fair, we're not going to put up with this anymore. However, this event is also important because it was one of the first times that women were standing up and saying, we can be independent too, we have a voice. So this event was significant for a few reasons. All right, friends, make sure you have these notes in your notebook. Once you do, hop on over to your assignment for today and get that done. There is also a video for you to watch, a Schoolhouse Rock video for you to watch about some of the events that we have talked about so far. The Boston Tea Party is tied into it. And then it also leads into where we're going to be heading tomorrow. So you're welcome to watch that video as well once your notes are done. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you tomorrow.